Hi, good evening, everybody. This is Flavia from Seneca. Hope you can hear me okay. Before we start anything, let's just do a quick mic test. So please type good evening if you can hear me okay. Type on the YouTube chat. Just wait 10 seconds, people. Nothing else. Okay, there you go. So good evening. Great. So now I'm going to ask Adam to say something, and then please type hello, Adam, on the chat so you know that we can hear him. Okay. So Adam, can you say something, please?
Of course I can. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. I hope wherever you are, it's lovely. It's very dark here and very cold, unfortunately.
Okay, so type hello, Adam, just so we know everybody can hear everybody, and then we can start. We're just going to wait 10 seconds. Okay. So perfect. Seems to be working okay. So now we can start. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to this webinar. It's a live streaming on YouTube. My name is Flavia. I work with Seneca Learning. I am the chief scientist at Seneca Learning, and we always do this kind of free CPD. Sometimes it's webinars, sometimes it's conferences, sometimes it's online courses. And the idea is just to provide as much free opportunities to teachers as we can. So this is a webinar, it's on YouTube. So everything, all the interaction, all the questions are gonna happen on the YouTube chat. So if you have any comments at any time, if you wanna share resources, if you wanna share your own experiences, if you wanna ask questions, just use the chat. And any questions that you ask during the presentation, I'm gonna keep track of them. I'm gonna save them somewhere else. And then I'm gonna ask Adam there at the end. So we're gonna have a presentation and then a Q&A session. So as many questions as you want, that's the best thing that we want. We want interaction, we want comments, obviously be respectful towards other people, but just type everything that you're thinking, type all your questions, all your comments, so that we can have a more interactive, more engaging, more productive session in the end. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it happens on YouTube chat. Second information is that you can all get a certificate for attending this webinar. So to do that, you just have to write me an email at the end of the talk saying that you have been to this talk. So I have pinned my email to the top of the chat. So I can show you where it is. Sorry, no one. Sorry, I could hear myself now. There you go. So let me just show you. So here, if you go to the top of the chat, it says where my email is. So just send me an email saying that you have been to this presentation, and then I can send you a certificate. And the other thing that you get from attending this is a discount on Seneca Premium. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Seneca, just 2 minutes. But most of the things that we offer are free for students, for parents, and for teachers. But we do have a premium side of Seneca, which is mainly for whole school features. So reports, synchronizing with MIS in each school, automatically creating classes, resetting students' passwords, all of these admin tasks and reports. We can offer them as well, but they are paid. But because you are here on this webinar today, you get a discount. You get a 10% discount on Seneca Premium if you ever decide to buy it for your schools. So this is also very good. So if you're interested in hearing more about Seneca Premium or just Seneca in general, you can also send me an email. And we have a website, which is senecalearning.com, just here in the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to start by just 2 minutes telling you about Seneca, just a little bit, and then we're going to go straight to Adam's presentation, and then we're going to have the Q&A session. Okay, so let's start. In the meantime, please just introduce yourselves on the chat. Tell us your name, your subject, your role if you want in the school, and where you're speaking from. So let's get started. Cool. No, just went all the way to the last page. Sorry, my computer is a bit slow today. No. Okay. So what is Seneca? Seneca is, I don't know if you know Seneca yet or not, but Seneca is an adaptive learning platform that uses neuroscience and just cognitive science in general to improve students' learning and reduce teachers' workload. We have over 6 million people using Seneca at the moment all over the world. So we are a British enterprise. So most of these people are in the UK, but we also have people accessing Seneca all over the world. So we have content not only in English, but also in Portuguese and French and Spanish and different content for different countries as well, following the country's curriculum. And we have over 300,000 teachers using Seneca, which is really cool. And there was some research done last year during lockdown that showed that Seneca here, we had over 99% approval by staff, which was really great. We were really happy with the results, seeing that Seneca has really helped people and teachers and students during lockdown, but also during normal in-person learning. Seneca was not created for remote learning, but it helps as well because it's an online tool, but you can use it remote, hybrid, or in person. So what really is Seneca? We cover most content all the way from primary to A level. And for GCSE and A level, we have exam board specific content. So if you teach biology, you're not going to see just biology. You're going to see AQA biology, Excel biology, OCR biology, etc. Because we want to make sure that it's very specific and exactly what you are teaching, what you are covering with your students in class. And we go all the way from primary to A levels. I'm going to send you this presentation to you in the end. So you can just click on the buttons here, or you can go on our website, which is senecalearning.com. So that is our content. And we have global recognition. So lots of different institutions in the UK and abroad that have recognized Seneca as a useful tool. Sorry. And like I said, everything's based on cognitive science. So we actually conducted some research to see if our methodology was really working. And it is, because students who used Seneca performed 2 times better than students who did not use Seneca. I'm sorry, I just have something on my throat. Sorry about that. It is not COVID. I got tested the other day and just something stuck. Back to it. So students who use Seneca perform 2 times better than students who don't use Seneca. So we know for a fact that it works. And why does it work? Because Seneca is a truly adaptive learning system. So we have a smart algorithm that keeps track of each student's answers in real time and then selects new questions for each of them. So 2 students do not see the same thing at the same time, because we all know as teachers that students learn things at different rhythms, at different times, have different weaknesses and strengths. So Seneca understands all of that and adjusts and optimizes content for each student. So it really, really works because it's based on data science and on neuroscience as well. And it's truly adaptive. We use gamification, it's very interactive, it's very fun for students to use. And then on the teacher side, we have a very nice formative assessment and differentiated learning platform. So you can give students assignments, things to do. Everything is automatically marked. And then you receive a report like this one, showing you everything, all the gaps in knowledge, everything that students are struggling with, who is struggling more than who, in which content. And that is very, very useful information for you to come up with interventions so that you can correct the track of lesson while it's happening, instead of having to correct something all the way from the past. So the idea here is to be used constantly, every week or every month, so that you have this day-to-day data, progress data about your students, and are able to know what's going on in your class. And it's all automatically marked, so you even save yourself hours of work as well. Next. And then on the parent side, We also have a brand new parent platform that you can send to your parents in your school. And the idea here is that parents get to see everything that their kids are doing on Seneca. So they won't have to ask you for updates on, homework, because everything will be here ready for them. So they can just go on Seneca, it's free, and they can see everything that the kids is doing on the platform. It's really, really useful as well. And like I told you in the beginning, we also have this whole school tools, which are mostly for senior leadership, but also just the school management in general, which means that you can download reports for multiple classes. You can join a different program, receive reports about your whole school. And if you sync Seneca to your school's management information system, you are able to download even more precise reports, because we get to know who the target groups are in your school. So you will see reports for pupil premium, English as an additional language, special needs. So you get to see exactly how each group in your school is performing, is progressing, and that's really, really good for you to come up with interventions. This bit here, this management information system synchronizing, is not free because it costs a lot of money to just have this, so we cannot offer it for free, but we can give you a discount. Like I said, everybody who comes to this talk, you can get a certificate for attending this talk, and you can have a discount code for buying Seneca's whole school premium features as well. Okay, so if you go on YouTube, on the same YouTube channel, why is my laptop not working? There. You're gonna see a playlist that's called First Steps, and it has all the things that you need to know about Seneca, but also just get in touch with me and I'll be happy to help you with that. So I highly recommend you to go on Seneca, like as soon as this talk is over, just explore it a little bit. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this presentation. And then just gonna see if anybody has any questions in the beginning. If not, we're just gonna go straight to Adam's talk. So I don't think so. Okay, so again, thank you so much for being here, and we're ready for the main event, which is Adam's talk. So Adam, go ahead, please.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Just reading through the comments of where people are coming from and the roles that people are doing. It's lovely to see. So a real mix and a real range of schools and countries that people are at, and roles that you're all undertaking as well. So really good to see. As Flavia said, my name's Adam. I currently work in a secondary school in Hertfordshire. A number of different roles, and have done a wide variety of roles in schools over the last 15 years. Currently, I head literacy at our school, so using lots and lots of data for that, as well as being a safeguarding lead. So again, use lots of data for that, but a different type of data and in a different way as well. Outside of working in the school that I work for, I also work with people like Capita, where I'm helping to design a data program, being able to manage literacy and how that all works together, and how you can judge and show impact within literacy as well. So hopefully I can bring some of how I go about doing that and how I view data to help you guys throughout this presentation as well. Before I worked in education, I used to work in publishing as well. So again, lots of different data in that side of things. So it's definitely something that I've always worked a lot with and always used a lot. And I really do feel that it's always enhanced all of the roles that I've done. And all of the things that I've been able to achieve in that as well. So that's basically me. And I'm now hopefully going to go onto my PowerPoint, which should work. And then we'll start the proper chat. And as Flavia said, if you have questions throughout, please just put them in those comments, and we'll have time at the end to be able to go through those. So yeah, hopefully this will work. I'm sure Flavia will tell me if it doesn't.
Yes, we can see it, so you can just go on presentation mode. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Okay,
perfect.
so coming up with a title for this, I spoke to Flavia about kind of what we wanted to do. And I get asked quite a lot, you know, how do you go about using data? You know, where do you start? What is the process? It's such a difficult thing to kind of start with, because there is so much of it everywhere. So I sort of thought, you know, why don't I kind of do a talk of almost going back to the basics, almost looking at, you know, where you'd start, how you'd go through the whole process, and then what you would come up with at the end. And the thing about data as well is the more you use it, the better you get at it. It's the same with anything, you know, we all work in education, we all know that, you know, so kind of don't be scared of it. But coming up with a title I thought was quite interesting, because, you know, as educationists, the house that we're building for the students, the end product, you know, can only be done when you put lots and lots of bricks together. But actually, fundamentally, before even you have the bricks, you have to have the clay that makes the bricks, that builds the house. So I sort of thought, you know, it's almost like it's pulling it back to the basics as much as possible, to be able to talk about how that information can lead us to our end product. So basically how data kind of can hold everything together and can really inform all of the practice that we do in schools. So the question I get asked all the time, where do I start? You know, there is so much data and so much information that we have in schools. Data drops, you know, almost by the week, we sometimes feel, into the schools that we work in. And there are lots and lots of different systems that we have, and, you know, they can vary from one place to the other. You know, you can work in one school and you can feel like you understand and know where the data is, and then you can go to another school and they have a completely different program and a completely different way of going about collecting data that, you know, completely throws you, and you almost feel like you're starting back at step one. So that question of, you know, where do I start is a really difficult one. But, you know, the fact that we are so data rich is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. The fact that we have so much data allows us to be able to use that in a really positive way, and a way that can, you know, really inform the things that we're doing and help us to, you know, do things better and understand things and see things in different ways. But obviously, having so much of it as well, it is that kind of minefield, and trying to, you know, get your way through and find what you really need and understand it, and then be able to use it in an effective way, and in a way that you really want to. So the question of where do I start, it really is to come up with your purpose and understand what your purpose is. And this is the process that I go through whenever I'm utilizing data, or whenever I'm trying to come up with a solution for something. People will probably do it other ways than the way that I do it. But for me, this is the process that I go through. And what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about that process, and I'm going to give you some kind of real life examples of how I've then gone about a process that I've used along these lines. So to start off with, you know, be clear on what your purpose is. Why do you need the data? What is it for? What are you looking for? And what do you want to know? And be open-minded about it, because, you know, data really can be manipulated. I remember probably about 8 years ago, the National Literacy Trust produced lots and lots of different data, and it was around reading habits, and it was around what students are reading linked to their abilities in reading. And there was one piece of data that highlighted the fact that the weaker readers were saying that they read ebooks. And the conclusion that the National Literacy Trust came up with was that students that are reading ebooks are poorer readers, are weaker readers. And they were saying that, you know, potentially the link is that ebooks, and this was when ebooks were starting to come out, ebooks can be quite damaging to reading, because the data shows us that the kids that are weak are the kids that are reading ebooks. So let's try and move them on from ebooks. But actually, what I felt and what I was seeing in the school that I worked in, and other schools that I've worked in, was actually that the weaker students were choosing ebooks because it was a way into reading for them, that they hadn't accessed reading before. But because ebooks were new, they were digital, they were interesting, they were fascinating, suddenly these young people were being turned on by reading, and they felt that it was something that they could do. So going in with a closed mind and going in and thinking, okay, I'm going to find this data to specifically prove this point, for me, is probably not the best way to go about it. I think you have to be open-minded, and you have to think, you know, I might find something that maybe is very surprising that I didn't think I would find. But by going into it open-minded, I think it really helps you to understand and to see the data as it is, rather than, you know, finding or trying to find some piece of data to really prove a point. So once you've got your purpose, for me, it is about these three things. It is about the ability to give you an insight to something, and this is what the data is going to provide us, to hopefully affect some change, and then to help prove any impact. It's really important that last point, that data allows you the ability to continually track. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of stumble. They'll have the data, they'll find the data to start off with, but then it's actually continuing to use that data. And if you continue to use that data and you continue to track the information that you have, that's where you have the ability to prove impact. I'm going to talk a little bit about impact in a minute, because I have a bit of a bugbear with the word itself. But for me, these are the reasons why I use data, you know, to help me understand something, to help me change something, improve something, and then to help me prove the impact that's going on. So when I talk about impact and I say that it's a messy thing and it's, you know, a little bugbear of mine, it's very, very difficult, actually almost impossible, to prove impact, to prove that something has had an impact on another thing. Realistically, what you're saying is, you know, you've got a start point, you've got things that happen in the middle, and you've got an end point. So let's take it in the example of a history lesson and history tests. So we have our history curriculum. We teach a year 7 student this information that's in the history curriculum. At the end of the topic, or at the end of the year, they take a test and they pass the test. And we say, you know, obviously the learning, the information that we've given them has had an impact on them. However, there are lots of different variables within that as well. Maybe what we don't know is that student's dad or mum is a historian, and they've grown up with a love of history, and, you know, they've learned everything already about history that's being taught in year 7. So we can't categorically say that those lessons have had an impact on that young person. But what we can say is that this was the start point, this is what happened in the middle, and then this is the end point. An impact is really you turning around and saying, prove that I haven't had an impact on this person. And that's where the tracking comes in really important. So when I talk about the literacy work that I do, you know, students come in at year 7 and we do baseline testing. So we understand where their starting points are. And then those students that are struggling, we'll put extra things in place for them. So we'll put interventions in place, and we'll track all those interventions, and we'll talk about all of the things that we've done, maybe strategies that we've shared with teachers that's going to help those students in the classroom. And then we'll test them at the end of the year. And hopefully they will have improved. So we've got the start point, we've got the stuff that we've done in the middle, and we've got the end point. And I'm turning around and saying, prove that I haven't had an impact on this young person. Now, like I said, so many variables, lots of other things could have happened as well within that young person, lots of things outside of school. Parents could have done extra work with them, and I hope they would do as well, because that's when things really make a difference, when everyone works together. But when we're talking about that, and we're talking about data, that tracking side of things is really important as well. So for me, when I'm looking at data, there's 2 real types that I'm looking at. I'm looking at that factual, the numbers data, which, you know, is the reading ages that I get. But actually, just as important as that is the anecdotal data that I can receive and that I can get. I really wanted to understand in my literacy work, and especially with reading, young people's attitudes towards reading. It's not really something that you can really judge properly. You have to ask a lot of questions. And in a lot of the roles I've done and working with a lot of young people over the years, you know, you kind of have a set number of questions and a set way of asking questions, and, you know, from the answers that you get back, you get a feeling about, you know, how a student thinks and how a student thinks about certain things. And so by asking certain questions around reading, I get an idea. But, you know, in my brain is very different from then being able to put this down as a piece of data or a piece of evidence. So in doing that, I decided to come up with a weighted questionnaire. So each answer, depending on what answer was given, had a certain point score weighting, and accumulated all together, I was then able to produce an attitude towards reading, very closely linked to the way that we judge in schools in England, attitude to learning, you know, using very, very similar language as well. So talking about, you know, outstanding, good, requires improvement, poor, you know, along those kind of lines. And so that subjective anecdotal data I was able to then use and able to formulate into something else. And I'll show you a little bit of that later. So in my real life example, I started probably about 8 to 10 years ago as literacy coordinator in a school, and there was lots and lots of things that went on, but I didn't feel that it really was tied together. So my purpose was to try and understand how I could identify who our weakest students were, and then how I can condense the intervention load that was on these students. Because what I found was happening from asking students, talking to people that were running interventions, was that there was lots and lots of different interventions happening, but actually we weren't really sure how much of an impact they were really having on those students. And some of the students I asked, they seemed to be having lots of different interventions from different people that were almost kind of counterintuitive and working against each other. And, you know, this overload on those students was really high. And so actually all of the interventions they were having, none of them were working, just simply because they were having so many. So my purpose was, can I identify who the weakest students are? And then can I condense that intervention load on them? Then be able to provide the right interventions. And then through that tracking, start point, stuff in the middle, end point, could I evidence any impact that we had? And then how could I go about articulating that information to other people who might need it as well? So that was my purpose. That was what I was trying to achieve. So the next part then is, where is the information? And this is something that you need to be really clear on in your school, to understand where all of the information is held, because it could be held in a number of different places. And actually in schools, it almost invariably is held in lots of different places, even if you have a central system. So understanding where that information is really important. And I think it goes back to understanding what your school's processes are. How do you collect data? How does your school collect data? Do you have, if you're a secondary school, do you have stuff coming in about your students over the summer term in preparation for the autumn term? What information is that? Can it be used? Is it useful for what your purpose is? At what points of the year do you have data drops where reports are maybe created, or things are updated, such as pupil premium spreadsheets or SEN information? All of those things can happen and are held in different places. And so the way that I break it down is the who, what, the where, the when, and the how. You know, quite simple, as much as I can make it. And that really helps me. So who holds the data that I need? What do I need to know about the data? Is there something specific? Is there something interesting about it? Is there something that I need to know that's going to impact on what I'm doing? Where can I then find it in future reference? And again, the more you go about doing something, the more you learn. And it is a learning process when you're using data, you know, especially if you're taking it right back from the very beginning. You know, you're understanding where it is, but you know, you're going to need this information again in the future, because schools are ever changing. You know, our cohorts change all the time. So we need to know in the next year, is it going to be held in the same place, or is it somewhere different? You know, where am I going to get that information from? Like I said, the when does the school produce data or more data, and who does it go to, and you know, where is that kept? And then how can you make sure that the data that you have and the data that you're using remains up to date? So that's also about your processes as well. So it's understanding your school's processes, but it's also, as you're doing that, it's about thinking about your own processes and how you're going to keep the data and the information that you have up to date, because like I said, things are ever changing. So going back to my example, so I wanted to know who the weekly students were. So I needed information such as the pupil premium information. I needed to know who those students were. I needed the SEND information, and I needed to know who the students were in each year group. And then I also needed to know who the weak literacy students were as well. And it's those sort of three main categories that I was working with. So the what did I need to know that was particular about those bits of information? Well, I needed to know the fact that the pupil premium register can change. You know, quite often it can change on a daily basis. Sometimes it might not change for a while, but a new student might come in, or a student already exists in school might then suddenly come into the pupil premium category that wasn't previously. It's the same with SEND. You know, we might have students that are on our SEND register, but there might be a couple of students that are going through specific testing or that are going through a diagnosis, and then that changes throughout the year. So I need to know that that information is likely to change, but also that actually it might not be as up to date on the central system as it is on the individual spreadsheets or systems that the people that hold that information has. You know, with the greatest will in the world, you know, schools are so busy. We have so many things that we're doing that administration isn't always as good as we want it to be, you know, putting the information onto a central system. And, you know, some schools don't have a central system where it can have all of that information. So I needed to be aware of all of that. I needed to know where that was being held, so, you know, and how I can use it and how I can improve on it. So, you know, this going to the spreadsheets for me and the people that hold that information initially that then feed it into the central system, if I go to them to start off with, then I'm probably going to have the most up-to-date information rather than maybe going onto the central spreadsheet or the central system that hasn't been updated because it's on a day-to-day basis that things can change. Understanding when the information, so obviously the pupil premium SEN, you know, I've said that could happen at a moment's notice, could change on a day-to-day basis. But then the literacy information, well, I know that there are 2 data drops throughout the year. There's one at the beginning of the year and there's one at the end of the year. So I know when things or the data that I need is being updated and changed. So then the how do I go about utilizing it? How can I improve upon what I'm doing? So making sure that, you know, I talk to the people in charge of pupil premium and SEND and that they update me when things are changed, so then I can update the information that I have so it can be as relevant as possible. So that who, what, where, when, how really does help me to break it down, to think, to kind of get the information that I need, where is it going to be, and then how am I going to use it? And then that links back to then your purpose, because, you know, that's your guidance really. That's why you need this information, is for your purpose. And so then by breaking it down in this way and keep linking it back, it really helps you. So then you've got all that information, you know where it's all held, you've got everything to think about how you can go forward with it, but how is it best collated? How are you then able to easily update it when you need to? And like I said, you know, quite often some of the data that you're using, and in my instance, it was the SEND and the pupil premium, could change on a day-to-day basis. So I need a system, or I need to produce something that allows me to be able to update it quite quickly and quite easily. And then also, when I've collated it all together, does it have everything that I need? Do I need to then go back to my what, where, when, how, who, all of that, to then get more information? Because actually what I originally collected and collated doesn't have everything that I need within it. So it's, you know, it's that process of continually just checking and just asking yourself and making sure that you've got everything that you need. Now, for me, I love spreadsheets, and this is just an example of one of my literacy ones. Now, it looks really scary, but it didn't start off like this. This is years and years and years worth of building upon and thinking of new ways and adding more data in to give me a wider picture of something that I want to see, or something that I want to understand more of. And realistically, what it started off as was probably only about 6 columns, you know, just students' names, what forms they were in, and then just that information that I was taking. So, you know, are they pupil premium? Are they SEN? Do they have weak literacy? that's how it started. And then over the years, it's built up and built up. And the good thing about spreadsheets is you can use it to show you lots of different things. You know, as you can see there, that I've got filters on everything. And I think the filters are really powerful on an Excel spreadsheet, you know. And if you use Excel, and I'm sure everyone has their own experiences with Excel, but it is something that you can utilize quite easily. It's not the best for being able to explain your information to someone else, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But in terms of being able for you as an individual to hold all of the data that you've gathered, it is a really good tool for you to utilize and for you to use. But what I would say is find what's best for you. For me, this works absolutely fine, and it allows me to keep all of my information in one place. It allows me to be able to update it on a regular basis. It allows me to use those filters, to use the other things that exist in Excel. And I don't use anywhere near what already exists. I just use what I'm comfortable with and what I know works for me. But you might find another system, you might find another model. And I think it is a little bit trial and error of trying to find what that is that works for you, and be open to, you know, the fact that it could be any way. What I would say about sharing documents on something like OneDrive, it does make it very difficult. It's good for collaboration, but when you've got lots of data in one place, it does mean that lots of people can change things, and it does slightly go out of your control. So I prefer to have it just accessible by me, that I can then update it, and then I know if things have changed and it was me that changed it. But again, you know, think about your processes, think about what works for you, and don't be afraid. You know, don't be afraid. This, like I said, looks like it's got lots and lots of things in it, but again, it started off very small, and I worked on it over the years. So you've got that, you've got it in your spreadsheet, you've got all of your information, but how does that data, going back to that slide that we have, how does it inform? How does it affect any change? And how does it evidence the impact that we want to be able to show? And then that links back to our purpose. So again, for our real life example, I had the fact that I wanted to identify who the weakest students were, and I wanted to be able to reduce their intervention load by making sure that they were getting the key interventions. So like I said, the spreadsheet works really well for me. It allows me to be able to filter things out, and those filters really, really help, because I can then see who those students are in each of those different categories. But actually, in terms of a visual, in terms of me then taking that information to other people, it doesn't work quite so well. So you do need to think of other ways of being able to show the information. And for me, that was looking at how I could take that data and utilize a visual way of showing it. How could I put it into something maybe more like a picture that would explain what I was trying to talk about? Because when you go to other people and you say, I've got all this data, I've got all this lovely information, look, come and look at my spreadsheet, immediately they turn off and they're not interested and they don't understand it. And, you know, and you can be very passionate and very knowledgeable about what you've collected and what you've collated. But if you can't engage the person that you're showing it to, that you need to get them on board with it and to be able to prove something, then, you know, you're at a loss already. So I decided that the best way for me to be able to show it was to use something like this, like a Venn diagram. I've got my 3 groups of students, and I want to know who are our most vulnerable. So obviously, by being pupil premium, by being SEN, and by being weak in literacy, they have their own areas of vulnerabilities. But actually what was important for me was knowing how those all link together, and being able to then highlight those students who are literally the most vulnerable in our school. And so by doing it this way, I could then see, you know, those students that intersect, and this is kind of the name that we came up with. Intersectionality was the students that intersect in the middle there, that are SEM, that are pupil premium, that do have weak literacy. They're our most vulnerable students. They're the students that we want to do the most with. And actually what was happening to those students was the person in charge of pupil premium was giving them intervention and lots of strategies for them to utilize and for them to work on. SEND department was doing the same. They were giving those same students lots of strategies and lots of things to work on and improve upon. Then I was coming in and saying, well, you're also really weak in literacy, and here's another load of strategies and another load of intervention. And actually, those students were just completely overloaded with lots of different things happening, and none of them having any impact. And so from collecting that data, from being able to show it in this way, it meant that the three groups, so the person in charge of SEN, myself, and the person in charge of pupil premium, were able to work together to be able to say, okay, these students are the ones that are intersecting with all of us. So let's come up with an agreed set of interventions, or an agreed intervention and some agreed strategies just for that student that works on all of the areas, rather than us all sort of pulling in different directions and having no impact on that student. Actually, let's work together collaboratively to be able to have a bigger impact. And that's simply just from collecting, you know, some really simple bits of information. And that's how one of my journeys started in terms of literacy and being able to see things in different ways and show things in different ways. Because out of this, then a lot more can come about. And that really is the power of data as well. So suddenly we had this information that, you know, was informing us about who these students were, but actually we were changing the way that we went about running interventions, the way that our processes in school happened. And so the influence of data really does have a much wider outreach when you're looking at it in those terms and you're utilizing it in those ways, because we started then to think, okay, this information that we have, we know this about these students now. So not only can we put the right interventions in place for them, but actually what's the impact that we can have on the classroom as well? We know these students have these issues, these vulnerabilities, these weaknesses, and we know the things that are going to work really well for them. So can we share that with teachers as well? Even just by sharing the fact that who these students are and the weaknesses they have can help a teacher to inform their own practice in the classroom. So it's starting to have an extra reach. But then maybe we can suggest the strategies that we know are going to work best with that student in the classroom. So we're helping inform the teacher to, in the classroom, then help educate that student to the best of the abilities. And so starting to kind of a ball almost rolling of extra things that's just coming out of this one very simple collection of data that you can have. And that just went back to one question that we had, you know, who are our weak students and how can we make sure they have the right interventions? And suddenly we're informing our own practice, we're changing things, we're helping adapt teaching in the classroom just simply from those sort of small beginnings. And then we thought, okay, so in terms of literacy, we know that students that are poorly behaved, you know, if they're actually not in the lesson or not learning in the lesson because their behavior is poor, that might drop them into the students that are then classified as having poor literacy. So we started to expand out and we started to think and look in these ways. You know, does behavior have an impact on literacy? Can literacy have an impact on behavior? If we can spot those students that are starting to kind of their behavior pull them down in terms of their literacy, that's just going to roll and it's just going to get worse and worse. Can we put things in place as soon as we notice it to stop that? But also, we've got students that their weak literacy means that they might become poorly behaved students in class because they don't understand, because they're not able to access the lesson due to their weaknesses, that they're then actually not behaving in lesson. And again, that's having an impact. So can we spot those students early? So again, just from this simple bit of information that we had, we're starting to really progress and change and do new things. And it is about that. It is finding new ways realistically to present the data that gives you that insight. And hopefully that information you can see through how I've used a real life example. And then just to add on to that, one of the things that I love is I love how data can be shown in lots of different ways. And I came across this a couple of years ago, and it's called a Horseforth quadrant. And it just shows data in a different way. and it's about how students' attitudes and their abilities. You can have a look at it on a quadrant, and depending on where the students appear depends on the type of information that you do and the type of work that you would do with them. And so in utilizing that, suddenly I can then change it to, you know, something to do with reading. I can look at a young person's attitude to reading linked to their how close they are in terms of reading and chronological age. And then I can look at what information I might give them, what extra things I might do for them, what interventions I might put in place, how I might encourage them to improve, depending on, you know, if they've got a poor attitude, but actually they're really good at reading, you know, well, that might change over the years, because that poor attitude will suddenly outweigh the gains that they've previously made, and they'll start to plateau, and then their chronological age will overtake. So in utilizing those things, I can do, you know, different things. And just going quickly back to what I talked about the anecdotal evidence at the very beginning, that survey that I produced was able to give me all of this information, you know, that in one cohort, it allows me to see students in a very different way, to be able to build a picture of them, to be able to put the right things in place. And this is the stuff that I've been producing with Capita. So lots of different ways to be able to show data, and then to be able to use that data to inform your practice. So the takeaways really are being clear on what your purpose is. And this is that process. So what is your purpose? What do you need the information for? What data do you need to collect? Where are you going to find it? How are you going to collate it yourself? What's the best process for you? What's the best way? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it something else? And that you can update it regularly, or when it needs updating. And then how can you use that information? So as you saw from my example at the very end there, I was using that information to inform who the students were and the interventions they were having, but actually then to expand upon that and start looking at how that information can guide the way we inform teachers, that we inform practice in the classroom. And realistically, that's kind of the bare bones of how you go, or how I have gone about finding the data that I want and then using it in a positive way. I kind of hope that that's given you a good understanding, and by having a real life example has sort of given you an ability to see how actually I've gone about it. And like I said, this is my process. This is what I do. But when I talk to other people, you know, and explain this, it is something that they take on board, and they do seem to kind of get and understand themselves. So thanks very much. I'm going to try and come out of this now, see, and then we can answer any questions that we might have. Here we go. Hopefully that's worked. Okay, I think I've come out of it. Hopefully Flavia will come back on, and she's got some questions. Just looking at the comments here, I see lots of people have been writing lots of things in.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me now? I'm so sorry, Adam. I lost my internet connection for 5 seconds. I don't know what happened on with the broadcast, if it stopped as well, if it kept going. I think it kept going because nobody's saying anything.
Hopefully, so, fingers crossed.
It was really right when you were already halfway through the takeaways, so I don't think it was a big problem. Yeah, if nobody says anything, then I think it was okay. So, thank you so much. That was really, really good. Up to the 5 seconds where I lost it, all the way to there. It was really interesting. Okay, it's still there. And everybody's saying that they loved, that they liked it. So we have a few questions now that I can ask you. So one of them is, how do you control? I'm gonna place it here on the chat and then make it bigger so everybody know what we're answering to. So there you go. There's one question that was no. So they were talking about, standardized assessments, but is there any other way that you can control for all the different variables?
That's the problem with data. There are so many variables. I think,
Yes.
Just by really being as clear as you can on what the data is and where you're getting it from and how you're then going to use it, that can take away some of that. But the fact that there really are so many variables around data and so many different ways of interpreting it as well, and going back to that thing I gave you around the National Literacy Trust and the example around ebooks, you can see a piece of data and one person can think, well, it shows this, and another person can think, well, actually it shows this. Is anyone particularly wrong? I don't know. It's difficult, and each piece is are very difficult to be able to see as well. So I think if you can just be as clear as you can on what it is that you're using, and that whole tracking process, I think, is really useful. If you can, start point, all of the stuff that you're doing in the middle, and then end point, that middle stuff, is your evidence of what you're utilizing. So, I know it's not the perfect answer, but I'm afraid when you talk about data, there probably is no perfect answer in that way for all those variables.
Yeah, I agree, but we do the best that we can, and as long as it's enough to, get the information to fit the purpose of the, like I say, of the research, then that should be enough. Lucy was asking for a beginner's guide to Excel. Do you have a suggestion of how one can learn a little bit more about it?
I think just playing with Excel as much as possible, just going on and using it. And there are so many videos online. There's a couple of things that I learned recently that I only learned because I just typed into YouTube, how do I, or videos to help me do this on Excel. And sometimes I'll forget how to do something, but I'll know that there's a video online. So, if you know what it is that you want to do, then, or what you want to try and achieve, type it in, and there'll probably almost guaranteed be a video that someone has made about how to use it and how to go about it. But one of the best things, and we say in the classroom all the time with students, is just try it, play around with it, and you'll find your comfort level within it as well. Like I said, there's so many things I don't know about Excel. I'm not an Excel specialist by any stretch of imagination, but what I know works well for what I need and what I need to use. And that's my comfort zone. So I think you just play around, look for some videos, and then find your comfort zone.
Sounds good. So there's one more question here about different people in school. So what would be the main role of each role in school when it comes to collecting, analyzing, and sharing data?
So it could completely vary within different schools, depending on, even within SLT, what that person's role is. Is it pupil premium? Is it something to do with SEN? But you will probably think along the lines of the classroom teacher is going to be more based around looking at the data of their students, how they are within that lesson, looking at probably information on their abilities, where they sit. But for a classroom teacher, it's really important to know your students as well as you possibly can, because that will inform your teaching, and you can adapt for different students depending on what their needs are. If you imagine each student is a completely different person and requires a completely different set of teaching methods, but small changes, like one student might need you to regularly check up on them to make sure that they understand what they're doing, and another student might need you, instead of giving them a large piece of text, highlight or underline the keywords within that. That's really going to support them and really help them. Another student might just need to be sat at the front of the class, to keep their attention. And the more you know about a student, the more you can do that. So as a classroom teacher, even you would be looking at what information you can gather about your students to inform yourself as a teacher and inform your ways of learning, or your ways of teaching for your students. Head of department would be a next level up. How do they do that within their department for all of their teachers, and the information that they've got within that as well?
Great, brilliant. There is a question a little bit different here. It's about parents. So it's more about how much, how often, what kind of data.
Yeah, I mean, again, different schools will do it differently. You know, you obviously have to think about data protection and GDPR and all of those sorts of things as well, the types of information that you're giving away, and what's the benefit of giving parents information? What is the information that you want them to know that's going to help them to help their child? Because you want a partnership with the parents, you want to be able to work together with them. So, for instance, if I in my literacy role, I don't necessarily tell parents what their child's reading age is. I don't tell children what their reading age is, because that won't have any bearing or be any help to them. It's more along the lines of how often are they reading, what types of things are they reading, have they got a positive view on reading, and then what I can do to support that. So through all of those surveys that we run, we get their attitude to reading, and we can see, you know, maybe they don't read as often as we would like them to. And I give that information to the parents and share that with them, and then strategies. And I think, you know, it's got to be working together. It's got to be a team. Parents are incredibly powerful and incredibly important in a child's education, and it's how much can we work with them, and what information can we give them that's going to support that and benefit the things that we're doing as well in school.
Yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to, some data you don't want to share, right? Because they will have a actually negative impact rather than positive impact. There is a question that always comes up, but that's okay because it's just part of the time we're living.
I mean, massively so. I mean, how can it not have done? You know, in a secondary school, we have no key stage 2 data really for students that are coming up. So they didn't do any SATs. So yeah, we're definitely, you know, have struggled with that, and it has had a massive impact on data. I think it's just do what you can as well as you can do it, and think about the processes that you have in school. And obviously, you know, continued absence, you know, it's taken me a lot longer to collate all of the information and all the data that I would normally produce at the beginning of the year, just because of the absences. But I've just had to build in extra time to do that. And yes, it's had a knock-on impact with being able to put interventions in place, but we've done the best we can. You know, when that student is back in, they get tested, you know, and then we gather that data and that information. And if they need intervention, or they need strategies in the classroom, or they need information shared about them to teachers, then we'll do it as soon as we've got it. I think you just need to try and be as flexible as possible in your own school with whatever, you know, you have and whatever you're working with. But actually, you know, outside of pandemic, that there's, in a way, it's always a case that there's something that you have to adapt for. And I think that's when you're working with data, and just when you're working in schools, you have to be adaptable, and you have to, you know, a computer room suddenly might stop working. You know, how are you going to do all these online testing? You know, little things like that. Something always happens, and you have to adapt to it. And the pandemic, obviously a much bigger thing, but you just have to be flexible and work around it as much as you can.
Yep. We have time for one more question. So this is not exactly about data, but it is your expertise, and I'm interested to hear the answer as well.
Intervention. I would say the best intervention for anyone with weak literacy is actually understanding what the problem is. You've got to get right down to the bare bones. And as good as one-to-one is, as good as a computer program might be, for me, the biggest thing is informing teachers and suggesting things in the classroom that can be done. Because, you know, if the student's in an intervention, a one-to-one for an hour a week, they're in lesson times for 24 hours of the week. You know, if you can be putting things in place, if you can be informing teachers, if you can be suggesting strategies for those teachers that's going to work with those students, and then you can then do stuff with parents as well, and that's going to have the biggest impact, you know, than just 1 hour working one-to-one with someone. 24 hours in a classroom with 30 other ideas with a teacher. You know, for me, over the years that I've been head of literacy, has probably made the biggest impact on the students that we have in school. So really drilling down to what is the issue, what's the weakness, what's the problem, and then what can we do to combat that. And it will be a number of different things, but realistically, if you can have an impact on that student in the classroom, then they're going to make the biggest gains ever.
Yeah, good. That sounds great. That's exactly 7, so we have to stop now. Thank you so much, Adam. That was really, really interesting. There were lots of comments and questions and people talking about what you're talking. Can you let people know how to get in touch with you if they have new questions or want to know more about it?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as @real_lanc. So please do contact me through there, direct message, or just ask me a question, anything really. I'm more than happy to reply and answer any questions.
Yeah, fantastic. And everybody, thank you so much for being here. That was really great. Please email me if you want to get your certificate and your Seneca Premium discount. Go to Seneca to just check it out. There's a lot of data there that you can get from Seneca. And make sure that you follow Adam and you follow Seneca as well. And yeah, keep